All right, so we'll look into more of the database options here a little bit later. One thing we can do, since we know that the database is already set up, I can run the db status command. That lets me double check, and I can see that I'm connected to MSF3, which is the name of the instance. But what I'm really interested in showing is some of the other commands that Metasploit gives within the framework to do your work. So we'll get a chance to explore most of these, not everything, of course, but on any particular command. For instance, let's say I want to look at the help for a particular command like load. I just type help and the name of the command, and it tells me a little bit about it. Gives me some extra information. I can try this for another command like loot. We'll get a chance to look at what loot does a little bit later as well. But you get the basic idea. So you have some usage information, some command line options while you're inside the framework itself. Some of the other commands to think about. Once we are using the tool, I will kind of demonstrate some of the commands as we go. But a quick scan of the help directory gives you an idea of some of the possibilities. We can do things like load a payload. We can use an exploit. We can connect to a command shell. We can send a process to the background if we want to. There's lots of different possibilities here. All right, so we're going to poke around the interface a little bit more. I'm going to just kind of simulate the beginnings of doing some other kind of exploit work, just to show how some of the features of the interface work. For instance, I could decide I want to do a search for a particular type of exploit. So I can run the search command, and the one I want is going to contain the text reverse_TCP. That should turn up a lot of actual choices. And one of the ones I might be interested in among all the available options here is this one. Reverse TCP shell to a Windows machine. We can see that its ranking is normal. It's a Windows command shell. Reverse TCP stager. We'll talk about what that means a little bit later. But these rankings help me to decide if the payload that I want to use has an excellent chance or a good chance or a great chance of being successful. Most of these are showing up as normal. Sure, if I were to scroll, so I've got some here that are average, some that are good. But the one that I want to use as an example, we'll just go ahead and use this normal one. So I'm going to right click, copy that, and I can paste it right in. Go ahead and use that. Now you'll notice that the prompt changes to red. This shows me that I'm in the payload reverse TCP for Windows. I'm going to use the back command to back out of what I just did to show you a different way to do this. Maybe I have some idea of what the payload or the exploit is, so I can just start typing and use tab complete. So PAY, tab, I get payload. Start typing Windows, hit tab, I get Windows. I know it might be in the shell directory, and it's probably reverse. Now it looks like I have more than one option here, so I'll just start typing T, I hit tab, I get reverse TCP. All right, so now I've got the payload ready to configure. One of the powerful commands is the show command. Show lets you look at lots of different things. If I run show without any arguments, I'll get every single payload, every single exploit, pretty much all of the framework functionality. I can also narrow that down by running show to just show me exploits, or show me payloads, or show me no operations or NOPS information. I can also run show options if I want to see the options for this particular exploit. So it looks like what it's looking for is an exit function. Some of the options are predefined. Some options are not. So, for instance, lhost stands for local host, lport for local port. A lot of options that you'll see will have our host for remote host or our port for remote port. But in this case, I've just got lhost to deal with. And the way that I can put a value in, or put a setting into this option is to use the set command. So I can say set lhost, and I want to make it my local machine. So I'll type in that IP address. And now if I run set options again, I'm having a hard time spelling today. Oops, not set options, show options. I can see that lhost is now set. Another useful feature is, and we see this right here, is using the -G option. So what I'll do is I'll back out of that particular payload now that that one's no longer being used. Those options that I've set have been removed. So I can go ahead and use my up arrow to go back to that command I ran earlier. I'll go back into the same payload. Notice the prompt changes again. But now what I can do is I can use the setg command for my lhost. Setg is setting for the that particular variable to be a global setting. So if you're, for instance, if you're doing a bunch of work and you've got a target that's a particular remote host or a particular local host, like your Kali instance itself, it makes more sense to use the setg or set-g. That way you don't have to set this every single time. You'll notice, because I set this parameter, if I do show options, it's there. And if I were to go back out of this and go into a different payload, I would find that that local host variable has also been set globally. I can also unset, just like setg. I can use unsetg for lhost. So now that parameter is unset. That variable is no longer there. If I go to, oh well, it's unset from a global set, or from a global stage. I would have to unset it specifically within this plugin for that to go away. Now you'll notice that it's missing. So two options. It's a local setting for the variable. So if you back out of your payload, those settings are gone. Or the global setting, which lets you have those values persist while you're doing your different activities. All right, so we have a search command also. Let me back out of this. Search lets me do things like look for reverse TCP, for instance. I'm going to get a lot of hits on this search because there's a lot of reverse TCP options available. But I can also do things like search for a particular platform. So let's say I only want to look for OSX exploits. You'll notice the OSX shows up in a lot of these. Some of these are multiple platforms, so you see the word multi there. As you start to play around with the interface, this will become a little bit more natural and intuitive to see what it is that you're actually looking at. But it's a nice feature. I can search for Windows, for instance, exploits. So there's some nice features, and we can also do a help on the search command to see what the different options are. For instance, I can search for a, let's say, a particular author. I don't know any authors off the top of my head, so maybe that's not the best one to try. But we can try searching for a name, which I've already shown, but also the type, right? So I can say search for a post exploit that has the word TCP in it. Of course, that's going to get me a lot of hits, but you get the basic idea of how powerful the interface can be. I can also use the show command. If I run this without any arguments, I'll get all of the items that Metasploit has available. But I can also run, like, let's say I want to search for all of, rather not search, but show all of my payloads. So I can see all of those. And this gives you a little bit more an idea of what kind of functionality is really built into the framework. It's quite extensive. It's quite complex. It seems a little bit overwhelming at first, and that's normal. As you get more familiar, as we start to go through more of these functions, it'll be a little bit more clear. Okay, so let's look a little further into interacting with some of the payloads and other things to see just some of the mechanics of getting yourself situated. We'll go into more detail, of course, a little bit later as to how to select your target and what vulnerabilities to look for. All right, let's say my endpoint system, maybe there's a suspicion that there might be an Excel vulnerability I can exploit. Maybe I know that it's a Windows system and I can take advantage of that. So one of the things I can do is I can do a search for Excel. And I've got one here that looks to be good rank. Microsoft Excel malformed feet header record vulnerability. So this one looks good. I'm going to go ahead and use this. So I'll type use. Remember, I can just start typing and do tab complete. Exploit, win, tab complete, file, format, MS09, and eventually I'll get there. Or just copy and paste whatever you think is faster for your own use. All right, so I'll go ahead now. I'm in this feet header exploit, and I can show my options as we've seen before, just to see what's available to me. I can also do some other interesting things. I can show my targets. So what are the applicable targets for this particular exploit? So I can see I've got Microsoft Office 2002, 2003, 2007. So there's some interesting options there. I can also show the payloads that this particular exploit might use. So there's a lot of different choices for this particular payload that I can attach to my exploit to take advantage of this vulnerability. I might be able to also find some advanced options for this particular exploit. So there's my exploit again, and I've got other things here like the payload handler, the different encoding methods, and so on. So there's lots of options. Show evasion, that's not going to show me anything for this particular one, but it gives me some clues for IDS evasion that we'll explore a little bit later.